You are listening to NewVision, OldWays, the podcast that explores timeless wisdom for the modern mind in a fun, relaxed, and most important, interactive way with you, the listener. I am your host, Tony Marinaccio, and let's get the episode started. Welcome, everyone, to the NewVision, OldWays podcast. I am so happy you are joining me for an episode that is so very important and timely for what is going on in our country and in our own personal lives as well. But first off, as usual, I would like to thank all of you that listen to the podcast. It is growing all the time, and for that, I cannot be more thankful and happy. It has been a labor of love for me, and I look forward to a long run with this show and others that I do have in the works. So again, thank you so much for all of the support. I will certainly try not to have these long gaps in between the episodes, but a lot has been going on with me personally, and it's all good stuff, thank God. A job promotion that I am thrilled to get started, taking some classes that will expand my knowledge base and provide me with an endless amount of subject matter for this podcast and others down the line, and other personal life changes that have been positive to say the least. So all of that got in the middle of getting these out to you, but I should be able to be more consistent with future shows. So thank you for hanging in there with me. I really appreciate it. So as I mentioned, I have a timely and important episode that I believe is something that our modern world is struggling with right now, and that is the skill of critical thinking. This is so vital to everyone, but yet this skill has in many ways been marginalized by our digital society. I believe that if we can get back to making critical thinking a priority, it can and will improve our personal lives, our work lives, our relationships, and help us form a better understanding of what is best in our political beliefs as well. So without further ado, let's dive into episode 17, Critical Thinking, a Personal and Political Necessity.
We can probably all agree that education is important, right? That's pretty universal. But I want you to think back to your time in school and see if you can remember something. See if you can remember a time when you were actually taught how to think, where the lesson you were being given was specifically teaching little you as a kid with big wide eyes and a sponge-like brain how to go about the business of thinking. Now, if your experience was anything like mine, you'd probably struggle to think of a single instance where that occurred. And when you think about it, that's completely insane, isn't it? In the at least, 10 years that we all spend in school, we get taught all sorts of knowledge, like, this plus this equals that, such and such happened in 19 which is great, but the actual teaching of how to think, not so much, right?
That was Jesse Richardson, creative director for the School of Thought website, and what he said there is very important. In most cases, we were all taught how to read and write. We were taught history and science, but we were never taught how to think. Maybe you could find a teacher here and there that taught concepts that could help us, but mostly the techniques that could help all of us think through problems were never taught at a young age, and we were left to fend for ourselves and figure it all out on our own. It may sound like I'm being a bit dramatic here, and that is not the case at all, but not being taught how to think at an early age is a bit of a tragedy to me. There's a distinct difference between being taught how to think and what to think. And that line gets crossed more and more and more in recent times. And all of us have to think all day, but many of us lack the skills to be able to think through a problem or a situation clearly and objectively enough to make the best decisions possible in those moments. Imagine how much better our lives could be, how much better the world could be, if problems were well thought out and decisions were made on analyzed facts as opposed to decisions being made on half-truths, emotional biases, political positioning, or even just plain laziness with attempting to gather any information at all that could have been useful to form a better pathway. Far too often in this modern digitized world, we forget that our emotions should not outweigh the facts when deciding on what to do next. How many times do you see crimes committed because of an emotional response that, if held in check, would have avoided a terrible outcome? How many times do we see political decisions being made solely to satisfy a voter base without any consideration of possible difficult issues it will cause down the road? How many times do we disagree with each other simply because you are on one side of the fence and I am on the other. This podcast is being recorded kind of shortly after the big presidential debate that in many cases, on both sides, the individual's opinion of the outcome was determined before a word was spoken. How does any of this help us? Well, it doesn't. It causes a great divide in relationships, in our thought processes, in our political beliefs, and even how we conduct our day-to-day lives. So how then can these issues be solved? Well, with a skill known as critical thinking. Critical thinking is not a new concept. In fact, it can be traced back to the Greek philosopher Socrates. He taught that ideas were not necessarily correct just because parents, teachers, leaders said it was so. He told his students to examine every idea on its own merit. While he never supported rebellion for just its own sake, he did insist that ideas dispensed by people in positions of authority were not above questions. His students Plato and Aristotle carried the teachings of Socrates forward, while Socrates sacrificed his life for his beliefs, dying in Athens in 399 BC after a trial accusing him of corruption of the young. Death because he taught people how to think, not what to think. That is a great example of the importance of learning how to think really is. We will be talking about Plato and Aristotle in future episodes, so stay tuned for that. The method of thinking, though, that Socrates pioneered is still known as the Socratic method, but the educator and philosopher John Dewey coined the phrase critical thinking in his book, How We Think, in 1910. So then, why is critical thinking such a valuable tool that all of us should utilize? Well, critical thinking is an essential component of human progress. Without questioning authority and common wisdom, the science that we have today would not have been possible. An example of this is during the Renaissance. Figures like Galileo challenged the geocentric model of the universe. That's the idea that the Earth is at the center, which was widely accepted due to religious doctrines. His use of the scientific method and critical analysis of observational data led to the heliocentric model, which is the idea that the sun was really at the center of our solar system, fundamentally changed our understanding of the universe. Critical thinking can be defined as the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form an educated judgment. In other words, the ability to think about connected ideas thoroughly and independently, basing those ideas on factual evidence, not distorted beliefs. That's very important. A great quote from Friedrich Nietzsche states that sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusion destroyed. And therein lies a serious problem. Opinions and decisions are being made on many levels in our personal lives, work lives, love lives, political lives, without the use of any critical thinking, causing problems that could have been easily avoided if those issues were well thought out. Our digitalized world, and that, of course, includes devices, online activities, and social media has, at the very minimum, diminished our critical thinking skills, if not eliminating them altogether. Let's use an example I touched on in a previous episode, the student protests going on in the universities across the country pertaining to Israel. I have spoken with many students as possible since October of 23 when this conflict began, and an overwhelming amount of students I spoke to feel pressured every day by fellow students and by even more people outside the universities to go along with the protest. If they don't, they get shamed on social media, harassed on and off campus, and pressured to follow the crowd, even if they completely disagree with the viewpoints and the demands of the protesters. Even worse, when many of the protesters are questioned about their beliefs, they can barely answer the questions. When chanting from the river to the sea, they have no idea what river and what sea they are even talking about, yet scream for the destruction of Israel. I am never against peaceful protests with people that are educated about the subject and feel strongly a wrong has been committed. I will defend that right until my death. But when these protesters cannot offer any solutions of their own or even know how or why this conflict came to be, how can anyone take them seriously? I know I don't. Maybe, just maybe, there are alternative motives for these demonstrations. It's worth considering anyway, and that's for a future show. But I have spoken in previous episodes about looking inward learning what you really feel inside and thinking for yourself, not simply going along with the crowd to satisfy a fear of being ostracized. Confucius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." In other words, Confucius was inferring that it takes courage to think for yourself and learn all you can about a subject before you decide to act on it. Ignorance is no excuse for your actions. The stoic courage we spoke about in episode 2 is vital. If critical thinking leads to meaningful action, it must also involve the courage to defend and promote unpopular ideas. You must have an intellectual self-confidence. Otherwise, you will lack the courage you need and fall victim to the follow the crowd mentality. So why then is critical thinking not a priority to schools and universities? That may be a question or a big question for another show in the future as well. But the clear fact is many of us lack the ability to knowingly think through a problem and decide on the best solution. To do this, one must have a firm grip on their emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence involves the understanding and managing your emotions as well as empathizing with others. Simply taking personal offense when others disagree will prevent us from taking valuable advice into account while making decisions based on personal biases rather than actual facts. A critical mind will never dismiss information based only on its source. So what are some of the benefits to critical thinking? They can be, but of course, not limited to, improved decision-making, enhanced problem-solving skills, increased productivity, and increased creativity, which by exploring different viewpoints and thinking outside the box, we can come up with creative solutions to the challenges we all face. Also, it can help with the feeling of greater independence. We all know life can be difficult, but utilizing critical thinking can help make life easier by allowing us to make better choices and seeing better outcomes from those choices, thus diminishing feelings of depression and anxiety when things do not go well. Critical thinking can also improve your leadership and employment abilities.
What do we know about your thoughts, your mindset, the way you think? We know that your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. In other words, what you think will determine what you become. Applied to your leadership, we could say it this way. Your leadership is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. How you think will determine how you lead. The problem is that what you believe about leadership may be wrong. In fact, it was Mark Twain who said this: what gets us in trouble isn't what we know, it's what we know for sure that just ain't so.
That was speaker and author Craig Groeschel. And what he said there is so true. It all boils down to how we think, the words we use, and the actions we take in both our professional and personal lives. I have a leadership episode coming up, so please don't miss that. But in the meantime, there are several things we can do in order to develop our critical thinking skills. And these, just like anything else we do, takes practice. And our continuing self-evaluation on these points is crucial. So you may not be great at all of these, but that's where improvements can be made. Here are what I think are the most important aspects of critical thinking. We need to question assumptions. Remember the old saying, you know what assuming does? It makes an ass out of you and me. Well, that pertains here. So always question assumptions. Questioning assumptions fosters an open-minded approach to learning and decision-making. It encourages us to consider alternative viewpoints and evidence, which can lead to more balanced and well-informed decisions. This is particularly important in fields like medicine, where new research can challenge long-held beliefs and improve patient care. Next is one that I have touched on a few times in this podcast series, and that's to become self-aware. Again, look inward using the skills from former episodes to get in touch with the real you. Check out episodes 4 and 5 especially. They are great for this. Next, learn to investigate. Actively seek information from various sources so you get different viewpoints. Do not exclude an information source just because it doesn't conform to your needed outcome. Next, identify patterns. This is an underutilized skill that will allow you to recognize especially destructive patterns that can lead you down a bad path. Next, feed your mind. Again, knowledge is key. Always seek knowledge of all kinds. It's the only way you can effectively make proper decisions. By feeding your mind and seeking the truth, you will form stronger and better opinions, and your problem-solving skills will thrive. Next, be open to other points of view. Empathizing along with humility, knowledge, and courage will help you pick out the useful knowledge even out of the most seemingly useless opinions one can have. Disagreeing can be a learning experience if you are willing to have an open mind. Lastly, continuously evaluate your mental process. In episode 15, I spoke about how your thoughts and words form who we are. So continuously evaluating our thought process is another crucial skill. We have to learn to be objective here and know where our weaknesses lie and work on those to improve them. Otherwise, we can easily fall back into our old ways. The words we use are the nuts and bolts of critical thinking. We need to apply precise language to turn our thoughts from vague concepts into firm ones. I do suggest reading the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz for further insights on this. It's a really good book, so check that out. Real critical thinking is hard work, but the work can provide spectacular results. Why not put the hard work into critical thinking instead of backtracking and trying to fix all the mistakes you are making? There will always be mistakes, but a well thought out plan can keep those mistakes to a minimum, and the mistakes you do make can be learned from. There are some basic steps that are so important when utilizing critical thinking. The steps have been laid out in what's called the Bloom's taxonomy. First developed in 1956 by a committee of educators chaired by none other than Benjamin Bloom. This idea was updated in 2001, and there are a few versions of this depending on the style of thinking you are using. But as far as the cognitive or knowledge-based one, here's how it works. And I do suggest looking it up and seeing the structure may help drastically as well. But Bloom's taxonomy is based on a pyramid, and at the base is knowledge. Always start with knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the stronger the base. This includes recognizing or recalling facts, terms, basic concepts without necessarily understanding their meaning. The next level up is comprehension, the understanding of facts and ideas by organizing and summarizing information. The next level up is application. That's using the acquired knowledge to solve problems in new or unfamiliar situations. The next level up is analysis, the breaking down of information into parts to understand relationships, motives, or causes. The next level is synthesis, building the new out of combining the different elements or creating a new meaning. And the top level is evaluation, making judgments about the information based on a set criteria. So, as you can see, we could dive even deeper into each level, but lacking in any of these areas can allow for serious errors. So sticking to a process is vital. Now, we all know that not every problem needs an in-depth process every time. Some problems or situations can be solved with simpler heuristic approach. A heuristic approach is a model of problem solving that uses practical methods or various shortcuts to produce solutions that are not guaranteed to be optimal, but are sufficient for reaching an immediate goal. So these can include what we all know as rules of thumb or mental shortcuts, which simplify a problem by focusing on the most relevant aspects of the issue. Also, speed over precision, such as using AI to get a quick answer instead of doing full-out research. The pitfalls of the heuristic approach can lead to other issues, but when time is of the essence, it can be practical when used as correctly as it can be. Again, I realize that using critical thinking on everything would be too time-consuming, but the benefits of it as I stated earlier, can be amazing. We owe it to ourselves to think things through more thoroughly. In later episodes, I will be delving into depression and anxiety, among other things, but critical thinking can help with that. Gaining confidence with making better decisions can and will decrease those symptoms of depression and anxiety. It will decrease the fear of life that so many of us face. Knowledge is power. It will give you confidence to face life's challenges because you know you will be making the best decisions you can and decreasing the poor outcomes that you faced before. A lot of this may seem like common sense, but let's face it, we all make quick emotional decisions when at times we should have put critical thinking behind that decision. This, like anything else, takes practice. Like I said before, it really does. Thinking for ourselves and making educated decisions in life and politics is vital. Our lives and our world depend on it. Following a trend, following the group that protests or screams the loudest is doing more harm than any good. Look at the green initiatives. If one looks closer at the details, it usually takes more energy to produce the green materials like batteries, solar, and wind than the problem they are trying to solve. Look at the carbon emissions that the green materials produce. Educate yourself on that. You might be surprised at what you see. Again, following the crowd is not always best for everyone. So critical thinking has been and always will be a valuable tool that any of us can and should use. It will be a way for us to band together rather than be divided and conquered. And here again, if you look closely, divide and conquer is their tool to control us. And I, for one, will never be controlled, and neither should you. So what do you think? Well, I would love to find out. Here's a way to get a hold of the show and let us know. These are in the show notes, but as always, here they are. You can message the show from each episode on your various platforms. Just look for the send us a text message link, and you can shoot me a message that way. You can email us at newvisionoldways@gmail.com. Again, that's newvisionoldways@gmail.com. You can find us on what was Twitter, now X, at newvisionoldway. And again, it's at Vision Old Way, no S. Check out the New Vision Old Ways YouTube channel. Type in New Vision, one word, Old Ways, one word, and please subscribe. It is free and will show support for the show. It really means a lot and will help grow the show on YouTube, obviously. Find us on Facebook at New Vision Old Ways Podcast, and you should easily find us. And as a reminder, these are growing platforms for us and expanding all the time. So we need your help to get the flow going with the community. And last but not least, if you could do me a huge favor and subscribe to us, like us, follow us, leave a review on whatever platform you found us on, that would be so appreciated. That will also help secure guests that we will be booking in the future. So as I told you before, season 2 is going to have a few surprises along the way, and I truly hope you are enjoying it. I can't wait to get your input, and I also can't wait until we get together for the next episode of New Vision, Old Ways. Until then, be safe, be cool to each other, and let's change the world. This episode of New Vision, Old Ways has been engineered and produced by TKM Productions and your host, Tony Marinaccio.